righty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast. I'm your host, Brendan. We are unfortunately we're missing Sean today in this next episode. He's currently out and about on a fun little week-long adventure. And to be honest with you, I don't even know the full details of what he's up to. I know he's with our cousin Miles, and I know I saw like a video or something on Instagram from him that was, looked like they were doing some climbing up in the mountains with some snow machines and I don't know, having fun. So I'm sure there'll be some stories to be had there, but with without keeping anyone else waiting here, we're going to move into the intro for our next episode. And I want to welcome on our guest. So Sean, like I said, he's not here, but we want to talk about the Kobuk 440, which went down last weekend. And so Sean had suggested that we get someone else to kind of fill in and fill the void for talking about the Kobuk 440. So I'm going to welcome on our guest for the intro. That's Joseph O'Keefe. Welcome on today, sir. How you doing today, man?
Great, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, this over the weekend we had the Kobuk 440 and I was certainly watching it on my phone, just kind of paying attention to the tracker and it's a heck of an event and it's the last one for the Alaska mushing season, so definitely wanted to make sure we cover it. But you know, what are some of your thoughts about the race this year? What are some things that maybe stood out to you, or just any points that we want to start with?
Yeah, it's a great race. It's a race favorite for a lot of the mushers. Just because of a lot of the community involvement. And it's a tough race. Weather is always a factor. You got the wind, snow drifts, trail conditions this year varied quite a bit. There was a good storm that came in day before the race, and the day of the race, it cleared up, and the trails were pretty mushy, slow going for a lot of the guys, and it was a struggle for a lot of them. And then you had to deal with the heat a couple days into it. It got up to 40 degrees at one point. And then towards the end of the race, you had the pretty good storm that came in and snow drifts and affected some of the mushers.
Yeah,
15
yeah.
miles from the finish of the race.
Yeah, I saw that the some of those folks that were kind of in the second half of the pack really kind of got bogged down there. I think that kind of led to what it was Jesse Downey had to scratch. I think Emily Ford got caught in that as well. So that's obviously, it's a shame that Jesse had to scratch, but
Yeah, and yeah, it's a shame. 15 miles from the finish of the race, having the wind and snow drifts, and Emily ended up being about a mile from the shelter cabin, and had to tuck her down with her dogs, and she was able to get them going again and finish the race. It was her last qualifier. I know it means a lot to her. Yeah, a good job to all the mushers. It was a tough race.
certainly, and yeah, I guess one thing we should start with is big congratulations to Jesse Holmes winning. I think it was his third Kobuk, second in a row, back to back. Uh, he pretty much
Yeah,
jumped
it's his
out
third.
in third and pretty much jumped out in front from the get go. I know that at one point, I think it was it Ambler? No, maybe it was Kiana. One of those Kobuk. That's right. Tony got to Kobuk. Tony Browning got to Kobuk for him. But outside of that, Jesse was essentially the leader of the pack for the duration of the race. And so yeah, big congratulations again to Jesse. And Another kind of storyline for me within this race was that it's great to see Isaac Tieford and Hunter Keefe get back out there. I thought they both had really great races. I'm sure Hunter it couldn't be happier about a second place finish in the race. Any thoughts on those two?
No, it was great to see both of them out there and both of them do so well. Hunter's such a nice guy. So is Isaac. And I know it means so much for them to get back out there with their dogs. They both care and love on those dogs so much. And it was nice to see a good finish to the season for those guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's well said. And um, after a kind of a tough blow that they both kind of had to go through at the Iditarod, it's just great to see them kind of back in another race, land on their feet, have a great outcome. Let's see. Looking at the total
And
here.
Isaac in Rookie of the Year.
Man, I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
that's great.
And Hunter came in with 11 dogs, Isaac with 10. So again, kudos to them. And then got to give some love to Eddie Burke with a third place finish. If I was kind of looking at his race um tell me if you agree with this kind of summary. It looked like he kind of was making a push from the get-go, and that maybe that wasn't in the cards for the dogs. And so it kind of looked like he maybe took it back a gear. But, at some point in the race, in the last third of the race, I thought, oh man, maybe some of these other teams are going to catch him. And then Eddie had like a great end of the race, I thought, and really held that third place down there. I thought for a second though that Tony might catch him or even Bailey or something like that. But obviously he's had a heck of a season. Having his ordeal with the Iditarod and getting out and then being reinstated, but then not racing. And so on the podcast here, we want to see people have great races and great outcomes. And I think that for Eddie, this was probably another kind of like how you said with Hunter and Isaac. It's just a great way to end the season. Any
Yeah, to
thoughts
finish
on
the season.
any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I talked to Eddie when he got back from the Kobuk, and I asked how many dogs he ended up with. Well, he ended up dropping a couple of the dogs, second to the last checkpoint, and he was hoping to catch Hunter, and that's when he put it on the coals, and yeah, he finished behind him. But yeah, Eddie's done just a great job with those dogs. He ended up getting a lot of those dogs. Some are from Mars, Osmar dogs, and it was a team that he'd put together, and he's just done such a great job all season meshing those dogs and making them become a great team. Hats off to him.
Yeah, I agree.
It was nice to see him with a solid finish.
Yeah, hats off to him and great finish to the year. The year he's had off the field, we'll say, is tough. But then when you look at what he's had to do on the field, right? So he started his own kennel. He had to get all of his dogs. He had to build his team, like you were just talking about, where the dogs are from. So when you think about the totality of his season, and from ending the Iditarod in 23, right, that Rookie of the Year,
yeah,
and then starting your own kennel, and then going through some of the the deal with the Iditarod. I think for Eddie, it was probably nice to get a nice paycheck, third place. I'm sure he would have liked to done better, but all things considered, has to feel good about that finish. So,
yeah, definitely.
and then we'll move down the list a little bit. Let's talk about Tony Browning. That is a name. That's a name for me. Okay. Keep in mind, I'm the guy that doesn't know a lot, but I've heard about him the last few years. We've talked to Eddie, and he was under Aaron Burmeister. He said he was working a lot with Tony Browning, but I'd never seen Tony in a race. And this was the first time, at least for me, that I'm following a race that he was a part of. But I have to say, I was very impressed with. I know he probably wish he finished a little higher than fourth because he was so strong out of the gate. But what was your impressions of Tony's job in the race?
Oh, I think he did a phenomenal job. I've never met Tony. I've heard a lot about him and in his dog care. He's a good dog man, old school, and he pretty much taught Eddie everything he knows. It just brought him along as he was learning and training and mushing up there. And it was really, really good to see him with a solid finish. I know physically it took a toll on him towards the end of the race. But wow, yeah, fourth place. And it was just really good to see that. And he had mentioned this was going to be his last race. And he had was going to dedicate the race to Rick Mackey, who's battling cancer. And it was really nice to see him go out like that if this is his last race.
Wow. I didn't know that I was about to ask. I saw a video the Kobuk 440 did like an intro video for the race of all the mushers. And if I recall correctly, and I'm hoping maybe you know, I think he introduced himself and he said that he was 64 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, I do believe you're right on that.
So yeah, I mean, gosh, some of the folks we've had on talk about how difficult a race is, and they're a lot younger than 64. And so yeah, that's just a super impressive thing to be doing at that age.
And especially
So
with these a couple of the mushers I talked to, and they're in their 30s, and they said this race just took a toll on them. The slow trails and running, and that's what I told Eddie. I said, "Geez, try being 50 and doing this."
yeah,
So yeah,
right.
I mean, great job, Tony.
Yeah. And one thing I want to talk to you a little bit about that for me is kind of an interesting thing. At least if you're running a competitive race for the Kobuk 440, you are putting in some, for at least for me in my mind, some massively long runs. We talk about Sean and I for the Iditarod, we talk about, some of the racers are doing, like the 4 to 5 hour shorter runs, and then the longer runs are considered those like maybe 8 hours or longer runs. But in the Kobuk, essentially people the front of the pack is going checkpoint to checkpoint, and there's quite some distance mileage wise in between those checkpoints. So you have like 10-hour run, a 13-hour run, another 10-hour run. Are you familiar with that? Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah, a
just the
lot of these
difference?
checkpoint. Yeah, a lot of these checkpoint to checkpoints. There's like Sullivan to Ambler. I mean, that's a 75-mile run. Um, yeah, they're all 10-hour runs between checkpoints, and that's what makes this race a lot different and a lot tougher strategy wise. Because most of your races, you're going 50, 60 miles, and it's just a whole different animal to have to tame on this race. And a lot of the Iditarod veterans that I've talked to said if you can adjust and do good on these long runs for the Kobuk, you're going to do fine on the Iditarod. So this being a qualifier for the Iditarod, um, it makes that so much special of a race.
Sure. Yeah, and I remember last year, Sean, I still kick myself for not being a part of this one, but Sean had Jesse Holmes on, and he was talking about how he just strongly recommends to any rookie Iditarod that wants, or someone who's aspiring to run the Iditarod, he recommended adding the Kobuk, or at least considering the Kobuk 440 as one of your qualifying races, because he feels like it's a great race that kind of can set up for the following season for the Iditarod. So,
Yeah,
um,
100%.
so that's awesome. Any other things about the race that kind of anything noteworthy or anything else that you want to mention or that we should talk about?
The interesting part of this race, it's the mass start,
Oh yeah,
which
that's right.
is quite a bit different. The Willow 300 had a mass start. It's no longer a race, and that makes it just a little bit different. Um, at the
So
beginning of this, it's pretty neat.
if I think I saw the video of this, so I just want to make sure that I'm painting the right picture. Is it just essentially it's as simple as they are lined up all at the same line, and then there's someone that drops a hat, right? And then they can
Correct.
just go.
Yep.
Now, when I watched that video, I found it interesting, right? There's 10 teams in the race. That hat drops, and not all 10 teams move at first. So, it sounds like there's a little bit of a strategy there. Like maybe, you let the first few folks go and just kind of, let them get out of the way. Like, talk a little bit about that. What's your thoughts on a start like that?
On the Kobuk, if it depends your strategy for the race. A lot of guys that are front runners, they try to get up ahead right off the bat, and that way the trail's a little bit faster, and you don't have to deal with the trail crew, and the conditions are a little bit better right up front. Um, and that's a strategy of some of them. And then the other half of the field, yeah, they're just along for the race. And so I think they strategize a lot of that right at the get go.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think if it were me, I'd probably like just let a few folks go first and then go. So just interesting to see the different strategies there at the checkpoint. Sean and I, we were talking about a video that's been going around on social media where gosh, I forget the terminology. What is it called? The start where it's a mass start like what we saw, but like you're in your sleeping bag and you got to like pack your sled and then you go. Are you familiar with I forget what the name of it is. It's like a shotgun start, but the video has been going around on socials, and
No, I haven't
seeing
seen
that
that.
seeing that is super interesting. I'll have to find it and repost it because it's just like I would love it. The video footage is old, so I'm not sure they start races like this anywhere, at least not that I'm familiar with. But just found that super interesting. Um, so so yeah. So overall, another good Kobuk this year, and you know, it seems like Jesse with back-to-back wins, it would only make sense that he's probably going to be back next year trying to go for the three-peat. And so yeah, we'll be interested to see how things shake up for next year. What did you have anything else to mention about this race?
Um, we got rookie of the year was Isaac Tieford. Humanitarian award went to Bailey Vitello. And for the sportsman award, that went to Jesse Downing.
That's awesome. I love it. Um, yeah, what was I gonna say? So Bailey,
What?
he
And oh, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, so Bailey, Sean and I didn't really talk about it, but Bailey, had a great end to the Iditarod. And then he at the banquet he won the four by
Four wheeler.
four, the four
Yeah,
wheeler. And then he got, you said it was a humanitarian for this one.
yeah,
Nice,
yeah, and that's
nice.
for the dog care. And
Yeah, I love to see the job that Bailey's doing. He for at least for me, kind of came on the scene last year, and so he seems to be pretty dedicated to the mushing life, and hopefully we'll continue to see his growth here, and hopefully he can continue to do better and better in these races. But a big shout out to Bailey Vitello as well.
Yeah, yeah, good job, Bailey. I'd met him in Elam on the Iditarod checkpoint. That was the first time I met him. Really nice guy. It was right after the snow machine had hit him coming out of Koyak. Um, but yeah, he's a good addition to the sport, and I hope we start seeing a lot more newcomers come into this. Our younger mushers, we've got a great lineup of, and it's pretty important that we just uh, keep this sport alive for us.
Yeah, I agree, and especially he's from what is it, New Hampshire, I think
New Hampshire,
originally.
yeah,
Yeah, so seeing an East Coaster who's now kind of taking up the life of is he full time in Alaska, or does he still do kind of New Hampshire and Alaska?
no, I do believe he's full time.
So yeah, he's dedicated, and that's like another example. What was it? Josie Tier, Rookie of the Year at that Iditarod. She recently made the move to Alaska. So yeah, hopefully that continues to be a trend, but you know, I guess it's kind of sad that this is the last race of the season, but what it means is that Sean and I will be doing our best to find the various mushers and guests to bring on and make the off season interesting and at least give you guys a little something to follow. Um, I do want to give a quick little prep of our interview with Sean Williams, our guest for this episode. We had a great time talking with him, and this is our longest podcast we've ever done. So it's creeping up there to Joe Rogan podcast lengths. But kudos to Sean for joining us. He was very open in talking about his time with the Iditarod this year and in years past. Um, he also recently just launched a website, and so we kind of spent the front half talking about that, and then we got into mushing with him, and then we got into the Iditarod stuff, and it was a really great conversation. It was got pretty raw and real there when he kind of was talking about some of the various situations he's been put in. Um, but we hope that you guys enjoy this episode. I want to thank Joseph O'Keefe for coming on and providing some great background on the Kobuk 440. And you guys enjoy this interview next here with Sean Williams. All righty, folks. So next up is our guest, Sean Williams. Welcome on the Mushing Alaska podcast. How's it going, man?
Good. I'm glad to be here. Glad we could have arranged this interview.
Certainly, certainly. We're gonna have our hands full figuring out what Sean is being spoken to when I say, "Hey, Sean, I have a question." Like, is it Sean Underwood? Is it Sean Williams? Do I say Dub? Do I say you? How do we do this?
I feel like the problem, dude, when I record my voice and I listen to it, I've realized that you and me sound identical, Brennan. So I was gonna say, oh, you can just call me bro and call him Sean or something. But then when I start talking and I say Sean, it might sound like it's Brendan, and it's like, we'll do our best. We'll do our best.
Nonetheless, so how are things going? You are post Iditarod. You are kind of are you in this phase of you're like, okay, the Iditarod's done, and now I'm chilling? Are you still running dogs? What's going on right now post Iditarod with Sean Williams?
Well, I think about 2 minutes after the race, I was already back to being a parent, especially being gone for so long. It's like, okay, better get back on duty, sir, because you've been gone for a long time. But now, I mean, it's actually, as far as running dogs, uh, we've done a couple of fun runs. Not too much. It actually warmed up quite a bit the last couple of weeks, to the point where the winter has basically been over almost. Today it's been snowing all day, so maybe we'll have a little bit of extra time on the sled in this area. But I did have a bunch of dogs in the solo sweepstakes here in Chugiak. It was like 68 miles, I think, altogether. That was about a week and a half after I did a run, something like that. But other than that, we're just getting back in the swing of spring and family time for the most part.
Nice.
So go ahead, Sean, bro.
I was just saying, did you get a chance to go to the solo sweepstakes, or you just kind of send some dogs out onto the trail?
I had 10 I think I had 10 dogs go in the race. I was going to go, but I actually got COVID the day that after I got home from Dome. So I was laid up just in the fetal position for a week or something. And then I was kind of like an invalid in the window, arranging for dogs to go on the race. So people like Matt Cavellio and his daughter and sprint racer Garoche Parteau all took my dogs in that race. But I was just texting from the window, like looking out, all sad and haggard and whatnot. But anyway, it seems to be better now because of a week ago or something. Kind of a hard transition. But that's the way it goes,
A hard transition just with the COVID and coming back to life.
Well, yeah, no, just coming home and then thinking, okay, now we're gonna relax. And we're like, actually, we're not gonna relax. You're gonna be quarantined in this other room for the next week.
Yeah, that's
Instacart, DoorDash, and my wife picking up a lot of slack for a whole other week, basically.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, you sound and look like you're healthier. Things look good now, right?
Yeah, I got a haircut yesterday.
I need one of those.
I put a new shirt on.
Looking fresh, man. Looking fresh. I'm like Sean, as my brother said before we started, the pictures that we see on the Iditarod website are the image that I figured I was getting today. And so you got this fresh cut, looking good, man. I like it.
Yeah, no, the real Sean Williams hired me on Craigslist to be so I got about 45 more minutes before I had to charge him for another hour.
That's hilarious.
So, as
far as Iditarod photo though, yeah. So they have a couple photos. Right. And they put up originally they put up one with I have all this buffalo plaid hat and shirt. It's all red and plaid, classic style. But I just didn't like it because I just looked like a total stereotype. So I had to get them. I had to pressure them to change it to a more flattering photo. Anyway, that's the whole story.
So you've been working on. We'll come back to the mushing season. But you've been working on this website, Sled Dog Talk, and I don't know a ton about it, but it's something new and exciting that's been happening in your world and in the sled dog world this last few days. So could you maybe explain what this website is, what the goals of it are, and how that's been going for you and why you did it?
So sleddogtalk.com, a brand new website. I just launched it yesterday or maybe the night before that. The origin of that basically is after the 2022 Iditarod. I decided to take the year off from racing, and we had a new baby, but I just needed a project on the side that I decided to work on. And really, it seems like there's kind of a gap there for a real resource for the mushing community. It seems, 15, 20 years ago when I first got into mushing, it seemed like there were a lot more mushers involved in more in-depth conversations online than there are today. Although there's a lot more social media presence now. But I just had basically an idea to make a modern version of an online hub as a resource for the larger mushing community. Uh, so I started hacking away at it. Took it honestly about a year hiring people and figuring out what to do and what things work. And I'm sure that'll be an ongoing process. But uh, ultimately, the thought, at least, is to try to shorten the distance between people with knowledge about mushing and people that are interested in getting more in-depth knowledge. Not like on Facebook, there's a lot of things available, but it is for that business, they're really geared towards kind of a short attention span, things happening constantly all the time. Um, but there's not really like a knowledge base online for mushing. So there is a kind of an old school forum on there that hopefully what people will use for in that respect. There's a classifieds, which is really broken down kind of like Craigslist, but really just all mushing categories. And it's all things that I kind of broke down. What do people look for? What am I looking for? As far as dogs and things that I had to like message people and think about all the time. And you can post on there. Everything is free, so you can post on there. Like if have old harnesses or a dog available for adoption or any number of other things are on there. And then there's another feature, which is kind of like Wikipedia. And the people have tried to do this before. They kind of have a different kind of knowledge center, like an encyclopedia for mushing. But in this case, everything on this website can be user generated or community driven is another way to say it. So if you visit the website, you can contribute to it. Some of them, they'll have to be approved, like the Wikipedia style encyclopedia. Like if you add an entry, you can, I'll have to approve it, just to make sure there's not spam on there. But if you have like a mushing figure or event you want to describe or embed, videos or put some links to more knowledge just for people to learn about, then you're able to do that. And hopefully we can find a way to make a decent resource for people that don't know too much about the sled dog world. There are probably 40 or 50 entries on there, of major well-known lectures or basic things regarding sled dogs. But hopefully, it'll grow over time and people will contribute. And as far as the forum, you can kind of do that as well. As it's broken down by different categories of ideas between styles of mushing and race talk and all those kinds of things. And there's anything from fan hitch to distance or sprint. We'll kind of see what people are interested in talking about and let it evolve naturally from there. And then there's another section that I call the Trail Finder, which I really hope people will utilize. But it's for uploading GPS files of trails, and that could be it could be the Iditarod Trail. I put the Iditarod Trail on there. There's a couple of there's another race trail and another trail that was just uploaded, but you could put a dryland race event or like if you're doing canicross in your local community and there's like a local race or something, You could upload that there. Anywhere in the world, there's different categories. It's really up to people to decide if they want kind of a repository of just files available, um, and you could download those to your phone or GPS, so you won't get lost. So definitely, it could help people be lost less. That's a different thing. But yeah, well, I mean, it's just there, available if people want to try it out.
That's pretty cool, man. So it sounds like it's you've created this space for the sled dog world and mushing world that's gets better as more people participate and add their information on there, the trails and you start engaging in, hey, I got some, these booties. I got too many booties. I'm getting out of dogs. I want to sell them. I got a couple dogs up for adoption. Hey, we went out to the trail this weekend, and I know it's been warm out, but the trail's still good for these 20 miles. If you're trying to get a spring trip in Willow, maybe some places you don't want to go and some places you do. And so it's the more people that go to the website, the better it gets. And right. That's the idea.
It's totally up to whoever wants to use it to kind of drive what happens. I'm not creating content for it. I might post something interesting on the forum just as another musher. But for the trails, yeah, you can post trails in your local area. Doesn't matter if you're in Norway or Alaska or Minnesota or wherever. If you have used equipment, or you're looking for a handler or something, you can post all that on there.
It sounds like it's like a for the people, by the people kind of thing. Like it can really anything goes in a way, right?
Well, hopefully not any.
Well, within mushing, obviously.
Yeah, as long as it's mushing related, or it's really anything like as far as the trail finder, anything where your dog is pulling you, you're welcome to post that on there. There's going to be different categories. You can put it in your region. It's kind of already available to choose major regions in the world. You can it's like a click box, and then when you upload it, and somebody filters by that, they'll be able to find things. And it also is geographically centered, so you can see it's closer to where you are. You can make it show up. I mean, right now there's just a few trails on there, but if there were hundreds of trails, you'd be able to kind of break it down locally or by a few other ways to filter different trails. Or
and
like that, if you're planning a big trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a lot of people came up,
you can download that and put it on your GPS, and it'll help you. It could help you if you need it,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I remember like seeing Connor McMahon in Anchorage. He was trying to go mush his dog somewhere, and he didn't know where really any of the trails were. That would be, he figured it out. But and Facebook is a decent tool to do this on, and it's been a decent tool for years, but it's limited. What you can do with Facebook, and clearly you can't do all this stuff.
On Facebook, yeah. I mean, as far as trails, we do have a lot of local trails here that people ask all the time. Which trail connects to here? If I want to go this distance here, how do I do that? And I'll probably try to get those uploaded too. But it could be anywhere. You have some local trail systems. It could be 2 miles or 200 miles.
Yeah.
Really, whatever you use. And as far as that, kind of at least theoretically broadens access to the larger mushing community, and hopefully will encourage other people to try different trails. And maybe if you have a few more sled dogs on the trail, there's more of a cultural presence. If it got busier in some place where only you're using it with other mushers, maybe you guys help your own local sled dog community, whether that's dry land or sprint or distance or just people recreational. I mean, ultimately it's all recreational, hopefully, where you're enjoying it.
Right. And so since 2020, me and you have had like the struggle of people confusing the wrong Sean's. I remember you had an unfortunate 2020 Iditarod with start weekend, and people were like thinking that I had bowed out of the race, and then now we're fast forward 4 years later, and people have been confusing that I'm doing the sleddogtalk.com, but it's Sean Williams that's doing it. You said you've had a few people that
Dozens, yeah, dozens and dozens actually. At least 5 or 10 people every year. That's actually why I shaved and got a haircut, just for to try to differentiate who we
I
are.
do kind of look like 2020 Sean Williams.
Yeah, man,
a little bit.
weird. Basically the
Yeah.
same voice. I mean, yeah, no, that's happened so many times. I think there's been race volunteers or just people like hooking up a dog team. People thought I was you, or if I had shaved or a haircut, they're like, "Oh, you look a little different. I didn't recognize you, like without all your winter gear on." But then you see in their eyes that they're confused, and then most of the time I'll correct them. No, you must be thinking of Sean Underwood, because it's happened so many times. But I don't always do it. Sometimes I just let them. No, yeah, not in Atlanta. Yeah, no, we're just going for 20 miles, or even on Iditarod, there was some race vets thought I was you at the ECGs. Even there was somebody thought I was you, like you had signed up for the racing. Yeah, okay, that's cool, man. Good for you. Hope you get some followers.
Yeah, I know. Every time I see you at any checkpoint this winter, you're always like, do you want to? We should do a little 1-2 switcheroo. No one would know.
Yeah, like for Basin.
Yeah,
one of my handlers. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, that was we had the doppelgangers there at the Copper Basin.
Doppelganger. We have opportunity. Doppelganger kennel. Doppelganger.
Oh, okay. All right. It's like, seeing double, except for
or just call it doppelganger.
Yeah, no, it's been fun getting to know you a little bit this winter. Going to Copper Basin was a hoot. I was helping out with you and with Matt Pavelio, and yeah, that was fun to see you in mushing mode. You've been back to like, your story of getting into mushing. Where are you from, and how'd you get into dogs?
I grew up in Texas, in Houston. Sled dogs were not part of my life or anything that I even knew about until I graduated college. Right after college, I went on a road trip, like all around the country, like almost every state, like 45, with my little brother for like several months. And at some point on that trip, somebody was like, you guys need to drive to Alaska. And we had a 2-wheel drive, Nissan Pathfinder or something. And, there was some drinking involved and all that. Not with the driving, but like with the bet that we wouldn't go to Alaska. And so, oh no, we're going to go.
An important distinction, kids.
Yeah, very important. This is a long time ago. The laws were different and all that. The Wild West. But cars could only go 15 miles an hour back then. So anyway, but it didn't happen. So we started driving into Canada from where was it? It was like Montreal or somewhere. Hey, should we just keep going? But it took about 15 miles north of Montreal. Like, no, this is a really bad idea. We don't know what we're doing at all. We don't have a down jacket. We don't even know what a down jacket is. or anything. So it didn't happen. But when I got back to Texas after the trip, it only took a couple of weeks before I started just making cold phone calls to different groups in Alaska looking for a job. I called like some people looking for a commercial fishing job, and then eventually I landed on a summer tourism job uh, with Alaska Icefield Expeditions, which a lot of people have worked for. But I connected with Matt Hayashida and that whole crew at the time. And I think what actually happened is somebody dropped out, and then they needed somebody, and I just lucked out essentially. They offered me a summer job, and right after college, I was at my parents' house, uh, and I was like, "Well, when do you need me to be there?" Not knowing anything like how much they paid or really anything. Like, well, as soon as you can get there, kind of how sometimes things can be kind of vaguely described up up here. But like, okay, it was a Friday, so it was a Friday afternoon, and I made the flight for Monday morning. So 3 days later, I just flew up to Alaska right away, and then the first day in Alaska, I met Matt Hayashida, and I like went on a glacier, went into the mountains. It hailed, snowed, rained. It was sunny and warm, all the same day. And then he sent me like on a bush plane to Skagway. But for me at the time, it was kind of just a random small place. And I thought I made a big mistake. I was like, man, I need to get out of here. This is a little bit too much. But obviously I didn't, and I stayed, and it all worked out. But that was how it started to get into mushing. And Matt Hayashida, he used to race Iditarod several years, and that kind of was the window into the rest of it. Worked for AIE a few years, kind of segued into working for Martin Boozer for a couple winters. And that's a slippery slope, once you start getting around serious mushing. And then it was off and on, but then ultimately here we are doing racing. And I did a rod a couple times. Maybe I'm not the most serious racer compared to a lot of people, but we're still mushing every winter, offline, unconnected, not posting about it. But that's kind of how it all started, and that's what brings us to where we are essentially.
Yeah, the offline aspect is something you probably see less and less of these days, but there are like a lot of mushers out there that are just quietly running dogs, and they don't tell anybody about it except for the people that are right there next to them. You being one of those people. You ran your first Iditarod qualifier. Was it the Copper Basin in like 2009 or something, you said?
Yeah, it was about 15 years ago, 2009 or 10. But yeah, that was my first. I think I'd done like the Aurora 50/50, just like 50 miles one day, and then the next day again. But that was my first race, was the Copper Basin, which was really something to think about doing. As I just went into it blind, essentially. I mean, there were good dogs in, a good mentor, good handlers, all the resources were there. I just had no idea what I was getting into at all. I mean, it ended up being like 55 below. This is before you had fast internet. Really, it wasn't like super prevalent at all. Didn't know what the trail was. There were no trackers. I just kind of halfway told my family what I was doing. I had used a cooker maybe, actually a few times, but in a race setting, never, obviously. So yeah, I was like staring at other teams. There's a lot of experienced teams that were from the Copper Basin. So if you're like a newbie rookie, you can pick up a lot of things from a lot of people. And I had seen people do it properly with Martin, obviously. But that was totally an eye-opening experience for sure. Going up over mountains, just figuring it out, shivering, dancing on the sled. MP3 player, I think it could hold like 16 songs.
But you still do. You still
Which
only
actually I've
listen
gotten
to
worse. I've
16s.
actually gotten worse at since then. But at the time, that was kind of a big deal. You had like 15, 20 songs. Huge deal.
When you ran, and then full circle, you ran the Copper Basin this year, and you were listening to about 15 songs or 20 songs for the entire time, even though we
I
have
think it
the
was
technology.
40. I think it was 40.
Oh, it's
Actually.
40 songs. Okay, all right. You doubled. Take it 15 years, you doubled your set list.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple different. Some of them were the same. A couple were different. I added a couple over the years, as new hits came out, and I found them. But yeah, no, you get into a trance when you run the same songs over and over again. And actually, to that respect, 2 years ago in Iditarod, I had a couple MP3 players that I loaded up with like 1,000 songs, and I shipped them out, a couple of them out into drop bags just in case I lost them. And about 40 miles into the race, I turned it on, and it hadn't loaded properly. I just had the demo song, and it was about
Oh
45
my.
minutes long. Just an instrument.
Oh God.
And the same thing happened when I got to the various dropbacks, like 300 and then 600 miles later. I think one was at McGrath, another one was like at Unilaclete, but both of those had not correctly loaded the song. So I had one 25-second demo song for the whole time.
Like the Verizon wireless song, or like the default ringtone or whatever.
I would have loved to have that in addition.
Oh, okay. No, it's just a demo, 25 seconds.
Yeah, I did it without music essentially, which is
Yeah.
fine. You just have to change your mindset.
Yeah, you get some loud thoughts.
Talk out loud thing,
Yeah.
All right, so I want to chime in here with the classic doesn't know mushing question. So you were talking about running your dogs offline. Talk to me a little bit more about what does that even mean?
Well, it means you're not taking photos or recording it or really worrying about technology. I mean, there's always some new technology to gauge your speed or, listen to music, obviously, or just be connected. People will be on Facebook in the middle of the run. Or you can do it like
Matt Velio, exactly, is who you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's not the only one. Lots of people.
Yeah. No, he's
social media.
I'll just be like hanging out with Matt, and he'll be like, I think I'm gonna go live. I'm like, Matt, no, do not go live. And he's like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, people on social media love to see live. I have done it. I'm not gonna say I haven't done it.
No. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just a funny thing, and it is cool. I think having that access, but
for me, it's kind of like my time. It's my time, so I try to not be too connected to. It doesn't have to be your social media, just your phone or GPS or anything, and just be out there, because that's really what you're doing it for. It's to be on the trail or in different types of terrain with your dogs, getting to know your dogs and how they move and react, and the same for yourself, how you react to different situations and trails and snow conditions and all that. And in that way, you just kind of can clear your head. And sometimes maybe you have a lot to think about, but other times maybe you just completely clear your head and you just are in the moment and reacting to the trail, and that's really the most zen or most pure for me anyway. That's what I really enjoy. If you can get into that place where you're just moving down the trail with the team,
the flow state.
Exactly, a flow state. That's a good term. Exactly.
Nice. Okay, so when you said offline, I thought that meant like a style of running that was like
Running
I didn't
loose with the
realize you
dog.
just
Oh yeah, yeah.
I didn't realize you meant like just disconnected from like anything else that doesn't have to do with the dog. So
Yeah, you
that makes
gotta
a lot of
train for that, you gotta do your own chant on the trail or it won't be activated,
right.
You could do offline, just let them all loose offline and just run after them. I don't know.
Right.
Whatever.
You're not gonna be they're not gonna be pulling you around much. I saw some cool posts of Matt Hall doing something like that where he was running dogs out in Eagle and then just letting them loose on the glare ice so they could get used to mushing on that
Yeah, Matt Hall. He's the man. He's very good. Grew up around dogs. Man, I would love to do that. I would love to go with Matt to Eagle and just. I mean, he's a younger guy. I mean, I guess he's not. I mean, he's an adult, obviously, but I've known him since he was like 16. So he's been like that always. He just knows what he's doing. Grew up around dogs. There's a different layer there. Where you can understand dogs for sure. It's really impressive. To watch and you can pick up things from people on social media too, or talking to somebody like Matt. Or there's any number of people like that have an extra layer of knowledge. It's cool to learn from, and that's part of the mushing community. You don't always see picking up things from each other, little things, big things, whatever.
And that's all comes full circle to sled dog talk, that you can share those things with each other. And that's what's the cool thing is about, these races too, is like guys are all just kind of training your dogs quietly in your corners of Alaska or wherever. And then you see each other and you can just be sharing stories. And then next thing you know, you're sharing, oh, this is what my harness that I use. And my tug lines are this amount of inches long and my gang line's this long and yada, yada, yada. And next thing you know, you're coming back the next year, incorporating half of what that one guy said to you, in passing at the start of the Copper Basin or something.
Yeah, that is true. I think the mushing community, people are certainly competitive at the top, but like the rest of the winter outside of the races, people are really, for the most part, very collaborative and will share their knowledge and want each other to have a good time and do well. Especially in training, that you can really encounter that a lot. It's definitely a huge positive for the mushing community. But yeah, people will share knowledge. Maybe they keep a couple secrets race wise. I mean, obviously, people do that, but general things, how to make things work, or something they figured out that they liked. Yeah, they'll share a lot, and everybody will share with each other. And everybody has their own style. Maybe something that works for one person to run their dogs, and maybe their dogs are built a little differently than yours, or harnesses work differently. You just try things out. It can always be interesting, and you can always customize your own gear and just kind of try things out and see where it goes.
For sure.
Hey, so you kind of touched on working with Martin Boozer, and I just was kind of curious what that tenure was like. How long were you there? And just if you can just tell us a little bit about that experience. I know my brother Sean and I have discussed like his little playbook to finishing a race, and so just like interested to hear your any stories or anything about your time with Martin that you can share with us.
Yeah, I mean, working with somebody like Martin, there's so much knowledge there and experience. It's pretty hard to absorb all of it. Obviously, that's pretty difficult. But Martin has shared mushing with so many people for so many years, and the opportunity to work with him was kind of a no-brainer at the time. He was, still racing right in the middle of being super competitive. always trying new things. Things were changing in Mushing. This was like right when the sit-down sled first came out. But there's just so much there. And as somebody who didn't really have a lot of or almost any experience other than running tours, it just kind of opens your mind to a whole, not even just as far as how to run dogs, but a whole different world and culture, especially as you guys could relate, coming from the South. Uh, you're just trying to absorb as much as possible and learn. So that's really kind of a golden opportunity to do something like that. Uh, and Martin, he's forgotten more. I mean, he's forgotten more than somebody like us might know. But yeah, I learned a lot from him and continuously. But yeah, I was there for 2 winters as far as being one of their race type, like a traditional handler. Um, and that's when I ran the congregation with Martin's dogs, some yearlings and a mix of older dogs and a few other races. And then, that relationship has continued that whole time. I was not a handler for them after those 2 winters. But in 2021, that was a team that I trained up for Iditarod in 22. Those were all Martin's dogs that he let me borrow. And I knew them. I had run them. I knew them and train up, which is really another huge favor, essentially. Like somebody just let you borrow an entire dog team. Train up for Iditarod is kind of a crazy thing, but that's what happened. But yeah, we've been friends the whole time, and we've worked together for tours for several years. But as far as running dogs competitively or longer distance and all that, yeah, that was a huge opportunity and kind of gateway into meeting other people and learning and just starting out, you know. But yeah, as far as stories, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'd have to really think. Maybe I still have brain fog. But I mean, Martin was super competitive at the time. Him and Jeff and Lance were all pushing each other every year. That's right when Lance started winning. You have to invite him on the podcast. I know he's got so many stories.
Yeah. I'm sure we would have a good time talking with him, and yeah, he's obviously 30, the greatest record of all sports of all time, 39 straight Iditarod finishes.
Easily.
I know. One more, one more would be 40.
Cal Ripken, he has some, what's his most games played in a row or something. But yeah.
But his is not even close to half the length of the duration of time that it took to do that. Let's see.
Cal Ripken, 39 years plus straight. More the 3 years before,
So he did 2,632 straight games. So 20.
I don't know.
Anyways,
well, we'll give it to Martin.
All right. But, so while you've been talking, Sean, it's slapped me in the face that I figured out. You were using the word doppelganger earlier. All right. I figured out in the current fresh shaved or fresh haircut and shave and everything, Sean Underwood, I'm hitting him with a Luke Wilson lookalike. What do we think here? What are we thinking here? Do you see what I'm seeing? I mean, no, maybe, kind of.
Luke Wilson.
Which Sean are you talking to now?
I'm talking to my
Sean
brother.
Williams.
Okay.
You're talking.
I'm talking about Sean
Williams. Like
yes.
Luke. Yeah, I totally see that, dude. That's crazy. That's a good one.
I nailed it.
You ever
like it down into like half the size?
Yeah, but just in the online box that you're in, you do look like Luke Wilson for sure. Prime Luke Wilson. Just to be clear.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it just hit me in the face. I was like, I gotta say something.
That's good.
Yeah.
So this year, so you have your 2020 Iditarod, you had a family emergency, you couldn't run it. You 2022 biblical storm. This year you drama on the coast. But like going into the race this year, how were you feeling? You have like a couple dogs from third place Richie Deal dogs on your team, and you got your own kennel, which this is your first Iditarod with your dogs, that right, or was it in 22 as well?
No, this first year, yeah.
So what were the vibes like, to kind of walk us through the big race this year, starting at the start line?
Well, yeah, this year there's a different group of dogs. I got several dogs from Richie. The dogs are phenomenal.
The growly is what I was helping for everyone else cluing in. I was helping Sean Williams with the Copper Basin, and he was like, it's like, oh, there's a couple. They're kind of growly when you pick them up. They're just like, bro, no, you don't pick me up, and you put them in because you got to put them in the dog box, and they're just kind of have a little tude. I don't know if that was the Richie Deal dogs or not, but it was just kind of funny, and they were like, it wasn't like a mean thing. They're just kind of like I don't know. Like
it's
jocks.
It's definitely a grown-ups dog team.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, this is not for like a 13-year-old, daughter kind of dog team. This is yeah. Well, I mean, shoot, TG ran them, and she's doing,
she's
great.
Good.
Yeah. So,
but she's a good musher. Those dogs, yeah, they're real animated. So when you get around a new group of dogs, you just have to learn their personality. Just like people. These dogs, yeah, they're super animated. When I picked them up from the airport, they were growling on the way into the dog truck. Like the dog truck was just like vibrating from growling. I was like, oh shit. So they got a lot of personality. But they're just like that. They're just like to be loud, several of them. And they'll still like lick you on the face and jump up on you and roll over for pets like any other sled dog, They do like to be loud, which I do like a lot. And if you stop on the trail and you give them a snack, there's several of them. You got to throw an extra snack on the way up to the lead dogs. Otherwise, they're going to be jumping and screaming, all that kind of thing. Jumping up in the air, kicking snow.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, they're fun. I like that kind of stuff. Or I mean, a few of them will bark on the run, which is like my dream to have an entire dog team of dogs. Like if you had all 16 of your dogs, they would bark on the run. Like we see another dog team. Oh man.
Yeah, because like Brendan, typically, they'll like only bark when they're stopped, and then the second they run, it's like silent, And then occasionally you have some dog that just kind of barks every few minutes while they're running, and it's like, wait, what was that?
Yeah, and it's not really indicative of anything necessarily. You got to train them up and put the time in. And all of that is the same. I mean, they're good dogs will be more predisposed to doing well, but you still have to put the work in. But they are very animated. Keeps your spirits up, like Lance Mackey's team was real animated there for a while. But yeah, some people like dogs that are quiet, and the speed really can be fast for any dog team. It's up to you, but I like them to be boisterous.
Yeah, they definitely are. And dude, it was cool getting to see you out there on the trail this year. I saw you in Finger Lake first, and with everything still fresh in the race. I think that was, Dallas had that moose incident, and I don't know if you saw that moose out on the trail.
Let me. So yeah. Anyway, so I also leased a couple of dogs from Mitch team.
Oh yeah.
And also Dean Osmore. All those dogs were great. They had a pool of about 20. Mitch's dogs are real orderly and all business. Very good. Same with Dean's dogs are all business. They're more animated. But there was kind of a couple from them, both of them, plus the other dogs, all mixed in. But yeah, that kind of led into Iditarod, and it trained a little faster, and little more aggressively this year. Didn't have a newborn baby. We still have a 2-year-old, so kind of the same, but he can walk and talk.
Hold on. I gotta cut in here.
Well,
All
let me just
right,
say, I
all
felt
right.
good. The dog team was good. They were good. They're ready to go. They're better than me, obviously. Anyway, go right ahead.
No, I just want to say, like, okay, when the kid is like not walking, you can go out and train all you want, but then they're like start getting mobile. It's like game over, dude. Your life is over after that. I got a 2-year-old myself, so it's like you don't realize how good you have it before they start walking because you're like you literally don't have to worry about it, you know. But then once they start walking, it's a game changer. And like for me, my son he's already up to my waist, right? He can reach anything essentially in the house, and he's barely over 2. So
Once they
uh
start climbing, yeah.
you're over here like, oh yeah, like year 1 was tough, but year 2 I could go back out. I'm like, what?
We should go backwards in time probably on these questions. So yeah, my younger son was born 2 weeks before Iditarod 2022. So we're in a newborn situation, uh, where you're waking up every 90 minutes, or they wake up, they eat, they nurse, they poop, you change the diaper once or twice, they nap for 20 or 30 minutes, and it's only been 90 minutes, and then you repeat that for like 8 months. So that's what I mean. It was a
Yeah.
little bit, they're sleeping all night most of the time, or at least half the night at 2 years old. But yeah, no, yeah, training a dog team before children and after is those
Two
are two
different
different,
worlds. Two
two
different
different.
worlds, my man.
Yeah, so like that's the logistics required are a little bit different when that's involved. You know.
But not to cut you off from Sean, my brother, and his Finger Lake and all of that. But I was just like, hold on 1 second. So I'll let you get
Yeah, it's a
back to
little
that story.
ridiculous to train for Iditarod with small children. No question. No question.
No
But yeah,
question that
Iditarod,
what.
you're going forward. You're moving forward, and then you nap. Everybody wants to nap. Everybody wants to eat what you give them after a little while. You get to nap. You get to get up when you want after. Keep going and repeat that process. It's a little bit different. There's a little more scrutiny with kids. They're like, oh, no, we're not going to nap now.
Oh, dude, I'm holding out. I'm ho- I'm holding out, man. Our son still naps right now, and I'm like, thank God. But I'm like, I'm dreading when he drops this last
Yeah, but
nap.
I'm at that point now, right now,
Oh,
like in the last few days.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for you.
I appreciate it. Anyway, so that'll be the end of the interview. Yeah, take care. Yeah. Oh, anyway, go ahead. Yeah. So you asked me about the moose.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think the moose thing, I did encounter the moose. I probably went by there 30 minutes maybe later at the most, probably. At that point, I had crisscrossed with Dallas a couple times, before he pulled away and, it's best musher of all time and all that kind of stuff. When he was still like waiting around for the rest of us to get his thing going. But yeah, so that trail, what was that? That was going into Finger Lake. So that trail was super narrow and windy in the trees. It might have been 3 or 4 feet wide at that particular section. And it was, you basically have a full team still at that point. So your leaders are like 1 or 2 curves ahead of you. You're steering the sled, and the lead dogs are going around not the same curve, but the next curve. It's super whippy, and you're trying to get around small, very small trees. But you got to pay attention. So anyway, so that particular situation, the team had like, it was like a round, like a right turn and then downhill. We like whipped around and then the dogs like went down and then like to the right real fast. And immediately after the blind turn to the right, that's where the moose was. So by the time I actually first laid eyes on what ended up being that moose, I was already at the wheel dogs. The entire rest of the team, it was a one of those short sections where you can't even see your whole team. So I think that might have been lost in a lot of things on social media. It was so fast and so narrow and so curvy of a trail. For me, what happened was the wheel dogs in right in front, essentially I recognized an obstacle in the middle of the trail. Didn't know what it was. It was brown. Uh oh. Essentially, basically, my brain had enough time to say uh oh. And by the time I was able to put my head and look at it, it was under me. We were jumping over it on the sled. And I'll give credit to the dogs. They just used the moose as a ramp and jumped right over, uh, which is a pretty incredible thing. Like basically everybody just jumped right over. But yeah, so I went right over. And as I looked down and I'm like in the air going by it, I'm looking backwards, but you're still in this really whippy trail. And I see that it's a moose. I'm already like 6 or 8 feet in front of it by the time it registers. And it was very soft of a thing to go over. So, well, was that moose alive? Was he sleeping? Like, do I need to keep going? Like, just it's so fast. And clearly that moose was very warm. But it was just a strange deal. It's like, did we just jumped over a moose? Like, just like that, you realize it. But then you don't have any time. So you're already steering around the next turn, you know? And then you also have, 15 or 20 teams right behind you. So like stop right there with like when you can't even see half of your dog team or more, it's pretty hard to stop on time if there's a dog team in front of you. So I didn't know what was happening. Clearly somebody, I didn't know if the moose had naturally passed away or what had happened. But I knew we jumped over it and then we were on our way. It was just a split second thing. And then, I heard about it from other people once we got to the checkpoint, obviously.
That's crazy. Yeah. Like, so you didn't know it's a moose until you've already 8 feet past the moose. That's wild. So then
I was on top of it. And then registering the thought in a split second, you're like in the air and moving by it, looking backwards,
And that's like, I don't know the exact details of, only Dallas really does of what happened in those moments, but you got your team to take care of, and it's not, you don't ever really want to go back behind your sled, especially when you're less than 150 miles into this race. You whatever setup you're going to have to anchor down your team, you won't trust, unless they're actually like bedded down. And so
it's a complicated situation. I mean,
a really complicated situation.
Alaska custom and law and gutting the moose and all that, everybody in the trail knows that. In the moment is very confusing, and I'm sure you could talk to him about it, but if it had been me in that moment to see a moose, the moose would have already, like 10 or 12 of your dogs would have already encountered the moose before you even saw the moose if he was just around the corner, just in that particular section. So super fast, super confusing, and yeah, there's a lot of things to consider in a fast, volatile situation for sure.
Okay, and then the next checkpoint I saw you at was Nikolai. You'd conquered the I flew over that section of trail between Roan and Nikolai, and I was just like, yikes, that is like, there is not a lot of white stuff there, and but it seemed like everybody that came in, you included, said, oh yeah, it's a little bumpy and there's some tough spots or whatever, but it seemed like maybe the front of the pack, Dallas, I remember mentioning to me that there was one tree that was insanely difficult to get around, and that it gave him some trouble. But I think that tree had already been kind of pulled down by the time the middle of the pack got there. But like, how was going through the infamous for the second time? How was going through that stuff? How did it compare? And how are you feeling going into Nikolai?
I felt good coming into Nikolai. 2 years ago, going through the burn. Oh, just to compare the conditions, it was very bare both years in the burn. I do think there was more snow and ice this year compared to 2 years ago. It was mostly all dirt. There was a couple sections where it'd even be like the downhill would be the section where you get ice. Like wonderful. Now you're just gonna go faster. It was barren. It was hard to tell too, because it was mixed. The snow was mixed up with dirt, but that being said, we're talking about like 1% or less of the terrain. Like maybe it was 1% covered this year,
right?
0.5% covered 2 years ago. To your average person, is meaningless designation. But 2 years ago, it was totally white knuckle. You've never gone through that legendary section, like the gorge leading into there. Totally white knuckle, like to the point where you're yelling and screaming expletives as you go through. That's what I was doing 2 years ago. Like the gorge 2 years ago, it was a decent amount of snow. There was a lot more this year. A lot more.
Seemed like no one had any issues with the gorge.
It's still real technical.
Still sporty, and it's fun.
You hit trees and fall the wrong way and all that kind of stuff. But there was a lot more snow, yeah. But yeah, so then 2 years ago, going through the gorge, I stopped in Roan. I had like one dog I didn't want to drop, and seemed like he need just a couple hours off before continuing on. But yeah, it was all white knuckle, holding on, sliding on glare ice, and there's like rocks and like frozen buffalo poop that's like a hazard to break your sled, stuck halfway in the ice, and trees, all kinds of stuff. And then you're going on dirt and all that. But this year, I'd say I was not that worried about it, like really at all. I think the first time doing it for me anyway, I was totally scared in real time. Like, okay, we're gonna what is happening? This is ridiculous. Very technical. Not really. You've gone on glare ice, but not for long stretches. Dirt, going downhill. The burn, I think, was a lot hillier than I had imagined the first time. But this year going through, I knew what the trail would be generally, and I knew that there had been a lot of snow for the gorge. So even going in the burn, I just kind of drove the sled like normal, even just on dirt. It's totally a different thing, I think. And I had good leaders that would lead me. The leaders had been through more than me, so you could trust them and just kind of if you can keep control, you can make it through a lot of that more technical stuff smoothly. I did notice this year, like coming through, I shipped out extra plastic in the Rhone and had one more in my sled because I had to change plastic 2 years ago, just in the middle of the burn because it was totally worn down to the metal. So I knew that would happen. And then this year, so I stopped at some point before it had worn down all the way. And I changed the plastic out pretty quick, like in a minute or two. You just flip the sled over and tie off to a tree. So I had just a rope that I carry just to tie off to a tree. Maybe I'd hook some tugs, change it. But then I went like a mile and the sled hit a rock. One of the runners hit a rock. And then right under the pin where the plastic connects, and I hit the bump, but the plastic got sheared and ripped off one of the runners. And so we did a couple miles just on aluminum. And then I looked down, like there was like a little bit of an uphill, and we just stopped. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense, you know. And I looked down, and the plastic was gone already. And so, oh, we gotta stop. So we went like maybe a half mile, and I tied off to another tree and flipped it over, and there's dirt all in there. And the dogs don't really want. I mean, they're kind of like, okay, I guess we're stopping because I tied them off. But then I just unhooked all the tug, and I had to hack away with my just one like a pocket knife, not like a big knife. Hack away for like 15 or 20 minutes, all the dirt in there. I was pouring heat on in there, trying to clear it out, and I was kneeled on the trail, like blowing out the dirt. And it was like blowing in my face, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Oh my God.
Just to get it prepped, you know, because it's not going to go on. The plastic's not going to go on. And then I put another plastic on, and then we went and camped at a Farewell Lake, and I changed some new plastic there. So basically, I had like 2.5 changes of plastic. And then I found out, I talked to several mushers later in the race, and a lot of them had not even looked at their plastic. Or I just kind of noticed like people that were considerably smaller than me. So I'm like one of the bigger mushers, did not even like look at their plastic or worry about it. And they like checked it out when they're camping, like, oh yeah, it's kind of scratched up. But for me, I had like 2 plastics like totally wear down almost all the way. But I mean, it's just something you got to think about. If you're a little bit bigger, you probably wear down on bare ground a little bit faster than if you're on snow, you know. But it was good. I mean, it was fun.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I'm like coughing, you know.
Getting dirt to the face. Yeah, the heat, the same, Brendan, the same liquid and ethanol they make the fires with, but you can add that to the aluminum, and it just melts the snow.
Yes.
Okay.
Just like go over a lot of friction, like the most friction, the highest friction point of the race, you know, like sandpaper for 30 miles. You're just pouring the most flammable thing possible on the bottom, you know, and then you take off. And if you look behind you real quick, there's flames. Especially if you give like 15, 20 minutes of break dealing with it. Like whoever was behind me, there was like in Back to the Future, 88 miles an hour, and he leaves flames on the street. It's kind of like that.
It's kind of like that. The whole, yeah.
Like, but you didn't see that.
No one saw it, just you know.
Yeah, just me. I was hallucinating that.
So you know, you got to. I probably saw you in Cripple and but I remember the next time I really got to talk to you was in New Lotto, and you were like, I think it had been a really, really cold run on the Yukon River for everybody. It was cold. The whole trail was cold for everybody wherever they were. For the front of the pack, it was the portage, you know, between Caltag and Unalakleet, and for the middle of the pack, it was on that Yukon River. So you were, yeah, that was tough. That's a tough run. The Yukon on paper should be like a flat, straight, like you don't have to like navigate. You don't have to, you know, be dealing with all the BS that you just talked about. It's just an easy trail, but then it's always really hard for some other reason, you know?
Yeah, I think something about the Yukon this year, the air was a little humid, which kind of compounded, making it harder. It's harder for your hands to be warm when there's any humidity in the air when it's cold. It was 48 below, so what my thermometer said from Galena to Mulatto. And I think with experience, you know, a lot of people get their schedule right when they're running at the best times and resting and all this. So for me, you know, I kind of didn't have that dialed in. So that run where you saw me into Mulatto had been just a completely overnight run, like midnight to 5 or 6 a.m. or whatever it ended up being. But yeah, it was like ended up being 48 below, a little bit of ice fog. Some of that I ran with Will Road, who's got a really nice dog team, and probably like the fastest team on the trail if you were to look at all the times. which he was really fun to run a lot of the trail with. And those dogs are really nice to watch as they move. But for your own ego, you got to leave just after Healy from the checkpoint if you run.
Yeah. You're going to get passed. Yeah.
In this case, I happened to leave before him and they passed. And I was like, okay, they're moving pretty good. And you don't really have any perception of how much faster. But we were moving good. We were having a good run. It was just happened to be cold. So, like, really, I'm like, oh, man, my hands are a little cold. I wish I was moving a little faster. But it was fine. Nothing that you had not seen before. But then I had a couple of dogs get tired about 5 miles from Mulatto. And it was still like 45 below. But then, you have when you see your dogs like start to act like they're a little tired and you're close to the checkpoint, you have to make a decision. Are you just going to stop immediately and put them in the sled bag? Or are you going to go the last couple miles? Maybe it's like 30 minutes into the checkpoint, and then drop them or give them some time off and see if they're all good. But in this case, I just decided to stop. And there was one dog that just seemed a little tired. You could tell he was getting a little tired. And plus, it had been kind of a hard run, 48 below on the Yukon, it had been cold. So I just loaded them in the bag. And then I went like another mile. And another dog was showing the same kind of issue. Or he was like slack. His tug line was slacking. He wasn't really pulling. And then I was like, okay, we have like 3 or 4 miles to go. What's the right thing to do? The right thing is to just carry him, give him a ride. He just pulled me all the way there. I've been riding the sled. So the right thing to do is to carry him. So the only problem with it, I already had one dog in the sled, and all my gear is a little bit bigger since I'm bigger. Like my parka is 40% bigger. All my stuff is bigger. And I have enough snacks to like, just in case you need to stop, you have extra stuff. But I really didn't have enough room for 2 dogs in the front of the sled bag. And it's 45 below and you're so close. So you just had to be like a little bit, you like gather your composure. Like, okay, well, we might be out here for a few extra minutes. So I have a bivy sack that goes around my sleeping bag. And just real quickly, I decided that I was going to have to put all the extra gear in front of they had a little compartment for one dog. And then in front of that was all my main gear and snacks. So I just took the bivy sack, loaded everything in there, threw that on top of the seat for the sit-down sled. And I have a rope right there. I just tied it all on. And I loaded the second dog in. And then we went like 100 yards, and he's trying to jump out, barking and trying to jump out. And so he didn't want to be in the sled. He wanted to be back running with the other dogs. But he was just tired. So I was like, well, you're going to get a ride, man. But he didn't want to stay in. So I think on the GPS, I probably was out there for an hour. It took me an extra hour to get the last 5 miles into the checkpoint. It was like an hour and 40 minutes instead of 40 minutes. So when I came in, I was cold. And I mean, I wasn't that cold, but 48 below, it's cold. And with 2 dogs in the sled and me being over 200 pounds, I was pedaling along. We were going like, it felt like we were crawling the last few miles just to get in. And on top of that, there was some situation going on at the checkpoint. So basically, I didn't even really check into the checkpoint. I like wandered around Mulatto and like went around the block and parked where the other dog teams were going. So I came in backwards, and then I had 2 dogs, and then we just camped, and it started to be sunny and whatever. But at that point, I was mentally ready for a camp out. Yes, that was the harder 2 or 3 runs for me on the race.
Yeah, the Yukon River is.
But that was actually not the coldest for me. You said front of the pack had the portage. The portage was cold, I think, for everybody. For when I went through, I had kind of crisscrossed with a few other teams. Will and then Anna Hennessy had a thermometer that said 60 below at Old Woman Cabin. Uh, so that was just another one that it was just, I mean, it's cold for everybody. But yeah, it's definitely harder when it's that cold. The plastic on your sled doesn't really work the way you think it should. It's super abrasive. So when you're sliding, you just go a little bit slower and it's a little bit harder for the dogs to pull. Maybe you need to pedal more, push up the hills more, and all that kind of thing just to make the same progress. Anyway,
Gotcha.
yeah, I'll just finish that. So yeah, I pulled into Old Woman after what seemed like a long run because I knew it was cold. I didn't know it was 60 below until we got there. Um, but I had been working a lot just to. There's so many moguls and uphill for the first half of that portage. First
Right.
like 3 hours are like uphill, short uphills with like moguls.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say like moguls. That's like your least favorite thing because you're like it's kind of jerk. It can be kind of jerky if there's a lot of moguls, but you just have to deal with it. But when we pulled in, like other teams had pulled out and they had just run. It was the last, like when I opened the door to Old Woman Cabin, Will was like putting the last piece of firewood in the wood stove,
God.
and like right at that same point, and I was like, it's 60 below outside. It was like 60 below getting here, and it might have been like 50 below at that point because the sun
Warmed up a little bit,
just a little bit. But even when the sun comes up, like it still gets a little bit colder. But it was just ridiculously cold, and he was like pushing the last piece of firewood in, and there was like a branch of like a green tree. He was like cutting up, so there was no time to like go in and dry off and warm up. So I just like got my axe after the dogs had been fed and all that, and started wandering around looking for dead trees. Um, And so I found like 2 or 3 dead trees and chopped them down at Old Women Cabin. They were like off the trail, so I was like wading into
My God.
totally fresh powder that had like not been touched all winter, and it was like I went into like my waist immediately, but 8 feet off or 8 or 10 feet off the trail, there's like a 10-foot tree that's totally dry. So I just went in there and like chopped down a few different trees, and then chopped them up. There's like a couple hand saws that are just that Old Woman. You can kind of cut limbs with that if you want. But we just like all three of us were like turned to fire mode for that cabin. Will was like cutting limbs and feeding the fire, and I was like cutting trees down. We were all like, okay, we got to actually be warm here, just for like the next 45 minutes or whatever. We figured it out. I mean, there's trees all around right there, so you just have to find the right one. Anyway, I was cold, and I was like, man, I need to dry my stuff out because I had been pedaling all the way for 6 hours or whatever. Might even been 7. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a long 40 miles. It's not even that like long distance wise, but it's a long run to Old Woman just with those moguls there.
Yeah, and the dog and everything's moving a little bit slower at that point.
Yeah, right. So we're getting close to our time, but I do want to obviously talk about the coast a little bit before we say goodbye here. But yeah, we were all watching, everybody's watching live chat, the live chat on the Iditarod website. We're all trying to guess what's going on in Golovin, and that's like a crazy that is a thing that's every musher is aware of is getting through Golovin, because it's the illusion of a checkpoint for the dogs. And so you got to go through that checkpoint, and they're like, wait, we've been stopping at literally every other checkpoint. Why are we not stopping here? But it's not a checkpoint. There aren't any bags for you, so that's what I imagine was part of the equation, at least. But, yeah, what you want to talk about how that all went down? No, you don't.
Like, actually, no.
All right. Well,
No.
Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. And on that note,
No, I'll talk about it another day. Yeah, so Golovin going from Elam to White Mountain is kind of it's a lot harder than people think. At least to Golovin. Once you hit Golovin, the last section is pretty easy.
Little
Gentle.
McKinley, right, is the climb there.
Yeah, so you've got Little McKinley, which I don't know what the real name is for that mountain, because I met everyone in Golovin, and so I don't think that they call it that. A lot of them, some of them do. There's a lot of Iditarod fans there. Yeah, it's just a really long climb, and there's a lot of false peaks, and it's steep enough at a steep enough angle to where a lot of it you're gonna have to push, even if your dogs are strong in the hills. So for me, I was pushing a lot, and I've asked people who have won the race and all that. Yeah, usually I'm just running at that. So I was pushing from the very back, and there was a little stop and go going up that, mostly because I needed to catch my breath. You can't run as fast as your dogs, so periodically I had to stop and push, and then it was the middle of the night. We get close to the top. It's like 200 feet from the top of Little McKinley, and I knew it was the top. And I had a GPS, and I looked at it and clarified it right there. And we stopped one of those times, and the dogs were kind of looking at me like, you still want to climb, really? But at that point, middle of the night, and I just decided, okay, we're just 200 feet or whatever. I just estimated 200 feet from the very top. So I just went to the front of the team. And I just pulled them right over the top the last couple hundred feet or whatever it was, 2 minutes. There's like mythology around becoming the lead dog or whatever, but you don't want to stop when you're that close to all this long downhill where it's way easier than straightaway. So I just pulled him over the top, and we started going down. And then you're back on your drag line, slowing them down all the way down. And then I was a little bit delirious. It was like real hard to stay awake this year. I was like falling asleep, like while going down the backside of Little McKinley, like jerking in out of consciousness. And then we started going straight, and it was all snow. Golovin Bay, it was all snow all the way to Golovin. And 2 years ago, all glare ice and super windy. Just a textbook stereotype where you're sliding around, all that kind of thing. This year, I was having a hard time staying awake, and it was all snowy. And I thought, man, there's no way I actually got turned around. Like one of these times I fell asleep, like just standing up, falling asleep, like driving the sled actively while asleep. But yeah, I thought I had like turned around going the wrong way. Where's Golovin Bay? There's no ice. And it was just like an easy, casual run all the way to Golovin Bay, all the way to Golovin. And as far as the sleep thing, yeah, I slept a lot. I probably got a couple hours of sleep on that ride while standing up asleep. There was one checkpoint, I think it was like McGrath. I fell asleep while driving the sled, and I woke up. My eyes were really dry, and I thought, how long have I been driving the sled with my eyes open while asleep? What is happening? And like they were so dry, I had no moisture.
You probably were, dude. And
my
that's
foot
happened
was
to
like
me
dragging
before.
on the side, like I was going around a corner, Anyway, that's another story. Honestly, at the time, I remember this now. I told a couple other mushers, I think I got 30 minutes of sleep, but I wasn't sitting down, like while standing up. I got like half an hour of sleep into McGrath. So like I felt pretty good. Fresh.
It's just like, yeah, dude, I had a great sleep out there.
I thought I
The
was gonna
dogs are just clicking along.
somebody fell. Somebody else fell, like lost a team or something.
I
I was
think,
eliminated. But anyway, so
yeah.
we made it to Golovin, but it was actually like 25 below. It had been a lot of work going up Little McKinley. So I was pretty wet, but I was still warm. My hands were pretty warm. I think the air this year compared to 2 years ago is more humid. I had these huge beaver mittens on, but there was moisture getting inside. So I was kind of cold. It was a factor. And there's a woman there who is taking care of the church that's right there when you enter town. She hands everybody like a little bag of candy as they go through. And I considered stopping just for being cold for a brief second. But then, we're just going to go. It's like 2 hours. We'll be in White Mountain. And then we just went the quarter mile or half mile through town, popped out on the other side, and it was all snow there too. And then like 100 feet or 200 feet, the leaders just kind of stopped. And I figured it was like, they thought it was a checkpoint or a village. I mean, it is a village, like it was a checkpoint, didn't really think about it first. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to situate the leaders out. We'll try again. But then they didn't want to go, like some of the dogs in the team were trying to pull, but the leaders didn't really want to go anywhere. They're kind of looking at me, which is a really strange thing. And like as far as a dog team not wanting to run anywhere, I've never seen that before, ever. And like almost all the dogs on the team were Iditarod veterans, or like had made it most of the way, or had run competitive schedules, or almost all of them had experience in the front half of the team at least. Then I was like, okay, well, I'll snack them right here. They won't stop because it was a hard run. So I snacked them, just waited till they were done and tried to take off. And they were kind of like waffling, like, yeah, I don't know. And then I thought, this is a weird deal. So we just fine. You got to make a kind of a quick decision. I changed one leader, moved one of the dogs who was doing that back, switched to a different leader, and they still didn't want to do it. So I thought, fine, well, maybe they just need to rest, So I flipped them around, went back to town. I just parked the sled right in front of the school. Got my cooker out right in the middle of town. It's like 4 a.m. And started scooping snow and melted water. They all had jackets on, so I didn't have straw, but I had like some other things for a few of the lighter coated dogs to put down, and they could curl up. The jackets are super warm, the ones that I have. I made them all a meal and snacked them again. Just kind of did a regular camp. But I will stay here like 4 hours and go. Now I try to like warm up myself, get some hand warmers out and all that. So we camped, and then can't remember the timeline exactly. Like Benjamin Good came through, and right when he came through, it was like 2 hours maybe after I got there. And I was a little concerned, but I asked him if he had any extra kibble. He had some extra kibble he gave me, like Caribou Creek or something. Some like really nice food, I was just I had kibble. I had several meat snacks. I was just kept thinking, like, okay, what is the situation here? Maybe we need a little more food and they just need to rest. So then after like 4 hours, I hooked my back again and tried to leave town. But then we made it further out, but then it didn't work, Okay. Something's going on. They don't want to. We went further out on the sea ice, like a few hundred yards. I'm sure it was on the GPS. I mean, I had texted Martin Ordnance from like InReach, like, oh, we're just camping here, just to like, give him a heads up. We're just camping here. We'll be in White Mountain midday. I'm thinking it'll just be fine. But anyway, so it didn't work. I moved some dogs around, and then that kind of became this whole thing. I went back to Golovin, rested a few more hours, left, tried different dogs in need. I mean, long story short, eventually I tried every single dog in need, moved them all around. One dog who really had the most mental issue there, I put him in the van. He's like, we'll just carry him all the way to White Mountain. This is like my oldest dog. And I tried every dog, lead, single lead, double lead. But there was always a couple dogs that didn't want to, whenever they were in lead, they had lost confidence. Something was going. I haven't figured it out. They'll have to bring me back every year. It's like my new analysis of what happened. So they would pull in the team, but when they were in lead, they didn't want to go. Basically, is what was in front of me. And I tried every dog, dogs that had never been in need, but were super animated. So at some point they're jumping, and half of the team's jumping in harness and barking in town. And I thought, well, we'll just maybe, sometimes when dogs start going to the bathroom on the run, it kind of slows your momentum, especially after you've been camping for the first little bit, Well, we'll run loops around town, get all that out, get them warmed up, and go for it. I did that a couple times, and it didn't work again. It's pretty disheartening. See them run 9 miles an hour around town, hit that same stretch of ice, and then nobody wants to lead the team. So then I did that again, and then I was trying to piggyback on the teams coming through. And Jeff Reed came through, and it was sunny, nice out, and so I was just parading around town, man. We ran 10 or 15 loops around town, and then I could see him on the ice coming, and so I just every time I went back, kind of looked, because you can kind of see out there a dot getting closer at one point if you're on the right road in town. And I stopped the lead dogs maybe 5 feet from where he was going to go right by. And they stopped for 1 or 2 minutes. They're still right there, really warmed up. And he went through, and I just shot out right behind them, 6 feet behind him, and followed him all the way out. And we made it quite a bit further, but then, he had to stop for whatever reason I don't know, just for what, you stop all the time, just briefly, maybe snacked him. I don't even remember. I was worried about it. My own team, obviously. He just stopped briefly, and then we kind of fell off right there. And, oh, man, so that wasn't working. I went back to town. And then, all that kind of stuff with trying the different dogs kept happening. And then at some point, I was going back and forth at that point, and I thought I had tried everything. You're tired, and you're so close, and I knew that trail was easy with White Mountain. So yeah, I was getting pretty emotional, to be honest with you. And I ended up calling Martin Nordman and Warren Palfrey I talked to them on the phone about that it was possible that this was going to be the end of the race, and basically they were like, you just need to keep trying, you gotta, there's still more teams coming through. Don't even think about calling me to scratch, essentially. So if I had tried to scratch, they probably wouldn't have, like, there's no way, this has happened to other people, all this, they've been around for a long time, so they know a lot of history. um, yeah, the truth is I was pretty down. But then I thought, okay, well, if this is going to be the end of the race, or like, I'm going to rest the dogs more, we're going to try it again. Like, I'm not just going to give up, even like being like 12 hours. But then I was talking to my wife, and just while I was talking to her, I was thinking, I'm not going to let this be a negative ending for the race, Like, I have to, like, for this to end negatively was going to something that would haunt me for a long time. So I had an epiphany, and like, that I need to make this positive, I need to have a positive memory attached to this day. So right there, I just had the idea, you know what? I'm just gonna give rides. Then there had been kids running around town. So you know what? I'm gonna put everything aside, your ego and all this and the race and everything. I was like, I'm just gonna put that all aside. I don't have any control now. And I'm just gonna see if I can give rides to these kids that are coming to check the team out, And that happens in a lot of villages. There's a lot of kids, and they're super excited to see you and your dogs and all this. So I asked somebody, like, hey, how many kids are in this town? And like, I got off the phone with my wife, like, immediately. I was like, I gotta go. I have to do this, man. Because I had been all negative and emotional. And then I just told her, like, maybe I think I'm just gonna get rides to these kids. And then like 1 second later, I have to go. And then it only took about 2 or 3 minutes to get a line of like 15 or 20 kids right in front of the church there, like between the church and the school, like where we had camped. And I just dumped all the gear out of the sled. You know, maybe this will rub off on the dogs. We'll just have fun. Short ride, have fun, happy kids, make it a happy day. So there's 1 or 2 kids at a time, and I already knew my way around town everywhere at that point. And I just started driving dogs. I started giving rides. I just put them right in the basket. We'd do like a half-mile ride or something. Just meandering through town, around cars, around buildings, just all over the place. But I was trying to figure out who's the best leader in this group, And I come around, and like next kid would be excited. They get in. And yeah, I don't know exactly how many, but there's probably like maybe 15 kids that get rides to. And then, so it was actually fun. They were all happy, because you don't get opportunity for dog sled ride that often in Gallup. I mean, maybe not ever. I don't know. Didn't see any dog teams there.
Might be an Iditarod record, dude.
Yeah, it's like water on one side, water on the other, and then it's like a little spit, and there's hills into the mountains. But yeah, so I gave advice to the kids, and a lot of that was, like I said, I wanted to change the energy. Like I just felt, I was pretty upset by that the energy was going to be negative, potentially, or very likely for the end of my race. And, I have 2 kids, and I just didn't want that. Yeah, I mean, it does make me emotional thinking about it, but that's why I did that. So, and I will say, like the very first ride, 2 seconds into the ride, I was exponentially more grounded. My emotions were balanced. Everything was in perspective. I just knew it was the right thing to do. Like instantaneously, I knew it was the right decision. Like, it was good. It was maybe not the right or wrong thing, but it was like a good decision for me to do that. Because in my mind, I was like, well, even if my race is over and it doesn't help the dogs or whatever, it's like, like you just want to put more positive energy into the world, essentially, and be there for the right reasons and all that kind of stuff. So I was very composed emotionally after that, even when it wasn't working. And I was very happy to do that. And maybe I learned a little bit about myself too. But that's what happened there. And then overnight, it was not a night. I mean, there was still one more team coming through. I thought, well, I'll give them a little bit longer break. I have like 24 plus hours here. And I'll try again. And at that point, I was resigned to walking to White Mountain. Well, it's not that far, 16 miles. It's maybe like halfway or something like that until the trail changes. And it's really not that far. So I was trying to walk them the last day. They ended up scratching. It's hard to get. And the problem was I was trying to get enough drag on a sled. So the dogs in the team were all pulling. But then any dogs in lead didn't want to go. I moved the same dog to the middle of the team and they're pulling. There was just nobody had any confidence in the lead. Anymore. I didn't have like one leader that none of the dogs I had raised from puppies, so maybe that was a big disadvantage. Or a leader that I'd been around for a really long time. And maybe there's some trust issues at that point. I mean, clearly all those things were going on simultaneously to some degree, probably. But I just couldn't get it to work. So I had ropes tied to my cooler, a duffel bag. I had to drag that down. All these different things I was thinking to get more drag on the sled while I was in the lead team.
But they were going like too fast for you to like walk in front of them, essentially.
They were balling up. They must have balled up 5 or 10 times.
So yeah, because that's
they got to all get along. We didn't have a single dog fight, okay, but there are some really animated dogs in that team, so I was a little bit concerned, especially since they had 24 plus hours off.
Right.
Nobody ended up fighting, but they were balling up, so they're getting tangled up. And I just couldn't figure it out. So I'd have to like run with the leaders and I'd drop off. And they would kind of slack off and then the team would start balling up. And then eventually I got into where it was like 30 or 40 feet at a time. One lead dog would go, but then it just didn't work, There was like 2 or 3 dogs lacking confidence that would cause issues. But you only have so many leaders, so like the choices are pretty limited. I just couldn't figure it out. And at that point I was texting with Warren Falkley. He already knew that I was trying my last attempt, I was the Red Lantern at that point.
Right.
So yeah, it just ultimately did not work. So then I just was on the ice there for a few hours, sent planes, and we got out of there. That's how the race ended. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a difficult 24 hours for sure, man. But it was cool that you gave the kids a ride, and like you said, you keep it in perspective. Of it is just a race, and you got to put some smiles on some kids' faces, and next thing you know, you're at home with the kids and the wife, and everybody's happy and healthy, and dogs are fine. And I mean,
all the dogs, they did almost all of them did was it like a back-to-back camp out race, the next week.
Right.
All the mental issues were gone. So something about that that I could just not figure out, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds all the solutions I was thinking of in my head, you've already run through, and
I know,
so,
like there were
I
lots
know
of
you're not like born like you're not a spring chicken. You know, you're clearly a like very competent musher. Been doing this for years and years and years. So I knew you were coming up with all kinds of unique, creative ways to get to White Mountain, and yeah, just
yeah, and I thought they would start running again once they got off the ice, honestly. But yeah, I just couldn't figure it out. But that's happened. I mean, there's a lot there probably that we didn't talk about. You probably have to get your all-time long podcast.
yeah, we're already breaking
Go back.
records.
You got to get all this other situation.
Yeah, but well, yeah, we think
yeah, so my two identifiers got very close to the end. It didn't work out. This one, I felt a lot more responsible for. But I had to think about that. What could I do differently in training or in the race or all those kinds of things? But that's life. Sometimes you make mistakes or things don't go your way. But how are you going to handle it? I mean, Iditarod, it's a tough thing. The hardest volunteer things you can do. It's not the military, but you still have your life in your own control. But it is a voluntary struggle. I chose to be out there, chose to do that, chose to train for it, chose to spend the time with the dogs, all of which I love. It didn't go my way for that. Well, it just, that's the way it happened. At least you're always learning something. I grew up in suburban Texas, so probably there's a lesson there that I need to learn about blowing through a checkpoint. I don't know what it is. We'll figure it out. Okay.
Well, I'll say this. We appreciate the fact that you're willing to join us here on the podcast and kind of talk about it, especially, it's kind of fresh. I know that when Sean, my brother, had to scratch, like I didn't talk to him about it for a while, and I'm his brother. So, when brother Sean told me that Sean Williams was going to be on the podcast, I was like, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're willing to come on and kind of share your story and talk in depth about it. You were talking about emotions. I'm sure you were kind of running the gambit of like sad, angry, mad, kind of like, so just thank you for
how long have you been recording for?
We're like, I think we're kind of shy of 2 hours, maybe. We're like around an hour and a half or so.
Yeah. To round out that story, I mean, you're probably going to want to ask me about the 2022 story. I don't know if you've had anybody on from the group of us. They got stuck in the Topcock Hills. No, Sean, you got stuck with the overflow and you had to crash that year.
Yeah, sure did. That wasn't super fun, and I definitely also, that's one of those ones where I do at least partially feel like it's on me. It's not just circumstance. And hearing, there was ways to that could have been handled with better from my end, I think. But with your wind situation in the hills in 2022, that did not, like 0% was that like, oh, all you had to do was do this differently. It's like, no, you just got stuck in like hurricane force winds.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know I'm kind of pushing that story here, but I don't know if I've seen anybody from that group of people that were stuck in that storm. But really, the Golovin emotional thing that you were getting into, it all ties back to the other periods of time with me and Iditarod, which I may not be able to say without getting too emotional. But the storm, you could have your own podcast if you invited everybody from that Topcock storm on. That'd be a good idea.
Just like a tiles of people, just like there's
Yeah.
like 8 people on, you know.
But I'm just gonna say, if you guys have like 10 more minutes, I can
Yeah, go for course. I mean, I'm fine by it. Yeah.
So let me think about this. So 2021, when you ran Iditarod again, we met right before the race. I ended up pulling out of the race the morning of. My mom got really sick. Yeah. So anyway, I pulled out of the race. She ended up passing away. The next year, I signed up to do the race. Yeah. Long story short, it gets to White Mountain. You know, I did the whole thing in her honor, of course, because that's what, you know, it's your mom, you know, for it to happen. I won't go into it too much, but basically she wanted me not to pull out of the race when I did morning up. But essentially I lied to her. Anyway, so I had to sign up again. So that's what happened in 2022. And then we get everything is going pretty smooth, and I wasn't rushing. I wasn't trying to race the race, you know. It was like 11 days in, or a little under 11 days at that point. But when we left White Mountain was the middle of the night, and Jeff Dieter was there, and I remember this so vividly. He said, and sorry for throwing you under the bus here, Jeff. But what he said on the way out of White Mountain when we're pulling the hook is, I think it's going to be a very pleasant run into Nome. And like five or six of us took off. And we headed into the Topcock Hills, and it started getting windy in the hills, and we had all kind of separated. We left within like 20 minutes of each other from White Mountain, probably. And the Dieters, their teams were a little faster than me, so they pulled away with Sebastian. But they were like a couple miles in front. We're in the hills. It's getting real windy, and it's all side hill there. It's real icy, with glare ice going on creeks, and we started getting blown over. I flipped over the wrong way. The wind's coming from your right, it's blowing you to the left. Flip the sled back over to get up. Probably happened 10 or 20 times. But then at some point, and it was all like in 5 seconds. It sounds like a freight train when it's that windy already. But it got worse. Like it was noticeably worse beyond what was able to flip me, somebody who's over 200 pounds, over in barrel roll, I remember distinctly going, and I looked down, and right after that, when it got really loud, and everybody else went through there, I'm sure it was loud. There was like this period where it just got even louder, like just insanely loud. And I looked down, and the sled was completely off the ground, and we were moving forward. And I just had some pretty troubling thoughts, like, uh-oh, in my head, like we're flying essentially.
Literally.
I looked down like a magic carpet, like that. Not the magic carpet ride that you want to have. The magic carpet ride where, like, Jafar took over the lamp while you're on the carpet, and you're getting flipped over. Like, and then I'm flipped over right after that. And we probably got blown like 100 feet downhill. So just totally crazy. And I like flipped the sled up and was like yelling to my lead dogs to get back on the trail. I didn't even know if they could hear me. I mean, it was that bad. It was like white out 10 feet in front of the sled, intermittently, like walls of snow coming through. And the thing about the markers, they were all on the left-hand side. Lots of people, I'm sure, had trouble going through there. So there weren't that many markers. Most of them were knocked over and broken, or the wind had pulled them out. It was like every third or fourth marker was there. I don't know how far that is, but it's far enough to where you're not seeing markers for periods of time, especially with whiteout, like blowing intermittent whiteout. I want to say it wasn't like totally whiteout, but there was like periods of time that I couldn't see at all. And so I found a marker off in the distance where I was close to the trail, and I just thought I'm going to wait until daylight and we're stopping. And I never had to stop like in training or race in a storm before. So I flipped the sled over and start to like get all my gear out. And before this happened, even right before this, a mile or something, just to describe how powerful the wind was. I didn't have my mittens on. It was not that cold. It was super windy. It might have been like 0 degrees maybe. But I just had my gloves on and I turned kind of to my left. In the bottom lip of the glove, the wind caught it and ripped the glove off my hand while it was on my hand. Which had definitely never happened before. It's not something I would do voluntarily. So the wind had ripped my glove off while it was all the way on my hand. And that's kind of a troubling situation. Okay. And then
Fuck my life.
yeah, like you're so in it. It's there's like bad weather. And what I realized in that is like there's like bad weather where you have the choice to panic or not panic or be composed. But this was like so bad that it turns to all reaction. Everything you have is a reaction. It's like totally emotionless almost. You're just so humbled by the moment. You're just reacting. Like there's no thought. Like whatever you have, you got to think. Like your body's just reacting. Whatever you know already, that's what you're turning to. It's just 100% instant reaction. In this case, I had to wear mittens, and once we finally were hunkered down, there was stuff and like flying out of the sled. Anything that was soft or not tied down just like flew away, and so I had to like quickly jump on everything. I had a couple of drop bags with like I had just picked up along the way, and I had stuffed everything I needed in those and tied them to my sled, or in like wedged one. There were like 2 drop bags, and I wedged one on either side under it because the snow was all drifting and like unbelievably fast. Snow like it's called spin drift. So it was getting into every little crack in your clothes and stuff too. So when you have to turn, when you, especially after the glove flew off, and my mittens were getting blown off intermittently, and they were on a harness, so they're like spinning around in the air. Then I'd have to grab them. If I go to walk and check on the dogs, like the mittens are just at eye level, spinning in the air, like wrapping around each other. But you like it's like almost like you're dancing with the wind. You have to turn with your hood on. You got to turn so where the wind won't get sucked into your hood and into your clothes and all that. So where never anything is directly into the wind while you're moving. It's pretty difficult to do. Then I moved all the dogs. I had 11 dogs, and I moved them into half of the space. So basically like 6. What were normally 6 dogs, I had 11 dogs. And we hunkered down, and I also have asthma, so I was like climbing in my sled bag in the fetal position. And the most important thing actually I had right there was my inhaler, albuterol. I realized I was having the asthma attack in the middle of all that. And so I had it in my left pocket. I was curled up fetal position, in the bag. It was pretty big. I had actually changed to a sled that Martin owned. And he's kind of famous for having really big sled bags, which was like kind of the thing that saved a lot of trouble for me in this situation. I don't know what I would have done without that sled bag, if I'm being totally honest. But my feet were sticking out, and it was the snow was drifting. And every like 2 or 3 minutes, I had to kick the snow because it was wet. So it would drifted pretty hard, pretty quickly, and it was like building up around the sled. And like, well, I might get stuck in here. It drifts around the sled, so I like moved my knife in my pocket. Everything was on the left side. That's the way I was curled up, in case I had to cut the sled bag just to get out, But so you can't really go to sleep in that scenario. And I would get out and like check on the dogs and like rub their faces off and all this kind of stuff. And I was on the inReach at that point, texting with my wife and with Martin actually in Nome. He was with a guy who was like search and rescue for decades. So I actually I knew all the Iditarod stories about people in storms, but I also knew some of the stories from search and rescue, which are really a lot worse for that area. So I knew that it was bad. I mean, like I said, it was all reaction. So you either you're gonna make it or you're not gonna make it. Basically, it's like total survival instinct. And but I did start to get some information to me that teams were needing help, or the 2 teams behind me, Bridget Watkins and Gerhardt, had been airlifted out. And then eventually, and I'll get back to the middle here, but eventually I realized all 5 of the others, there's 6 of us out there hunkered down. The other 5 teams had been helped or rescued, or they had made it to a cabin. Like, it was a little unclear what had exactly happened. I knew I was the only one left in the storm. And somebody like came up out of nowhere, and like in the middle of all this, I like texted out. I sent a message out that I was going to try to be like Rick Swenson in 1991, just pull this team from the front. And I was thinking I'd get to the shelter cabin at the bottom of Topcock Hills there, which was like, it was like 3 or 4 miles probably from where I happened to be. I don't know exactly. And so I started to try to pull the team from the front and be the lead dog, like something you kind of think about as like a Iditarod or just generally mushing mythology. If it gets real bad, we'll pull the team. And like kind of a little bit like happened over Little McKinley, but this was on a completely different level. And so I started to pull the dog team from the front. And when I did that, I got to unhook the sled and all this. The sled actually got flipped over by the wind. The wind was blowing it downhill. And this is like one of the things burned into my brain. My entire dog team, all 11 dogs, were digging in to that hill with me pulling. And we were getting pulled downhill. And they were looking at me like they couldn't do it. They were digging in like all the way, trying as hard as they could, and the wind was blowing us downhill. And so very quickly, this is again all reaction. I let the wind take me. I jumped and like ran to the sled, flipped it over, threw the snow hooks down, and like jumped on and balled the team up. And then we stopped right there, And I mean, your ability to think optimistically that you're going to get out of it after that is pretty low. But for me, the thing also at that whole deal with me having pulled out the year before, the day of the race, like 4 hours before, and getting to that, this entire race, at least like the 500 or 600 miles leading up to this storm, I realized that if I finished in 11 and a half days, it was going to be my mom's birthday. So I had planned it around for like most of the race. I rested longer. I'm going to finish this on her birthday in the middle of the day, and then be done with it. Because, the world had changed basically, and my world had changed a lot. So people started to come by, and I knew that I was trying to finish on my mom's birthday. So there was no way I was going to push that button. There was just, I had like the most expensive Canada Goose gear on, So I was wet. It was super windy. We were stuck there. And I was not even thinking about trying to get rescued at all at that point after many hours. And then somebody came by, like hit on the sled at one point when I was curled up in it. And all I could hear was, "Are you alive?" That's all they said. "Are you alive?" They just kept saying it. And I just yelled back, "Yeah." And they're like, "Help is on the way." And they left. And later I found out that was Bridget's husband, Scotty. He had made it with his cousin. Two guys, they made it on Snow Machine from Nome. And the actual search and rescue for other teams that had pushed the button by that period of time, their snow machines were getting flipped over trying to come out. And that's a really beautiful thing too, actually. So he's the husband, and he's him and his cousin. The only difference between him and the other people on Snow Machine is that it's his wife there for him to find through the storm that was flipping snow machines over to get there. And that was him that was checking on me in the sled. And, ultimately he made it to his wife, and then they have a family and everything. So he was feeling pretty bad. He said he was feeling pretty bad that he left me there to go to Bridget. And I was like, how can you possibly feel bad for that? Like, of course, that's what you need to do. Like, I would have sent you away if you try to stay with me and your wife is 2 miles away. Like, that's a no-brainer. And like, I was so happy that he made it through just to check on other people. And that's like a really heroic thing for him to do. But of course, he's got to go rescue his wife. Like, you should not feel bad about me, at all. Like, I'm surprised you even stopped, to be honest. Like, I would have sent you on your way. But anyway, that's like a beautiful thing that came out of that. But then another guy came through. He's a villager from Elam, and I started I got out of the sled for that one and started to talk to him. And we were like 1 foot away, separated our faces, and there was just snow blowing right through the 1 foot. I could barely see him. He's like right here. And at that point, I had got some word that like people were coming to do a wellness check, maybe from Iditarod. It was unclear what was going on, but I thought maybe somebody might come just to check on all those teams, not to help you, but like just to check to make sure everybody's okay. But obviously, if you need help, and somebody's willing to give it to you, then you take it. But this guy, it was unclear to me what was happening. I was totally delusional, delirious, and sleep deprived, and all this stuff, And so I get out, and there's snow blowing through us, and he goes, "I'm a traveler passing through this way. Do you need any help?" And I just thought, man, right in that
Is
moment.
this the guy that's in the Suburban on tracks?
No, it's whatever. Get to that.
Okay. What's the guy's? How is he traveling? Snow machine?
He's on a snow machine, and he just happened to be a villager traveling.
Just like casual, just pitter pattering from one village to the other. Going back home.
He happened to be like in the storm, So clearly he's got a lot more wind experience than me because he lives there. He's used to the weather around there because he lives there. But he offered help. And but I was not in the moment. I had no idea what was happening. It felt like I was some kind of like character in like an epic Greek tragedy, like the god that pushed this situation I'm in, or trying to, take me to the underworld, basically. And then this guy shows up, and I felt like I wasn't sure he just was talking that directly, so calmly in this storm, or if he was like with Iditarod somehow, but didn't want to tell me, or just had not told me because it's really difficult to communicate in that weather. And
Or maybe
just,
it was just Zeus himself.
yeah, or it was so surreal. One of the more surreal moments of my life, no question. But told him I was warned that I didn't need help. And just for a split second, I thought, I'm not accepting help because I'm staying out here and we're going to ride it out. So I sent him on his way. But later, I met that guy in White Mountain.
Okay. Not
And
Zeus.
when he got back, he was apparently really shaken up and was like extremely upset. Like he was so happy that he made it back to White Mountain. And he was worried about all of us that were out there because he must have encountered not just me, but anyway. So then that guy came through. But then after that, at some point, there were 3 search and rescue guys from White Mountain that came the other direction. And it was daylight, but it was still blowing a lot of snow. I couldn't see very far. And I get out of the sled and I'm talking to them again, like really close. And it's just, we're like waxing philosophical. And they're like, they didn't even say hi or anything. You just get up and all they say is, do you feel that your life is in danger? That's the first thing the guy has said to me. I mean, all business, search and rescue, these guys are as good as it gets. They're coming out in the storm. And honestly, at that point, I was a little cold, but I was not worried about happening. I mean, yeah, with the wind getting into every crack and all that was an issue, but I'm still warm, even though it's getting light. But I basically said, well, why am I out here? For the race was long gone in my head now. This was completely a survival situation for hours by then. And, that's just what it was. So, well, why am I out here? Like, what reasons could I still be out here? For my ego, like we had a short conversation about the existence of ego on Iditarod Trail, stuck in the storm. And we talked about having kids and like, well, should I be out here, et cetera, et cetera. But then it came up that they had come from White Mountain and they hadn't seen the Dieters or Sebastian up in front. And so I think I'd forgotten about the other guy, or 2 guys that came by, like Scotty and this other guy. But it sounded like nobody had checked on the 3 teams that were in front of me. And so I was relatively warm and okay. And I had no intention at that point, still, it was probably 6 or 8 hours in, to hunkering down, pushing the button or anything like that. But I think a few of them had already pushed the button. I don't exactly know the order of that. So I told them to leave, they said they were coming back through. So I was like, well, you should go check on those other teams because nobody's checked on them. Who knows what the situation is? And so they drove off to go check on those guys. And right when they drove off, I had this terrible feeling in my stomach. Like I just made the worst decision of my entire life, letting them drive away when I had the opportunity to get their help. It was a very humbling thing to watch, and it didn't take long for them to get out of sight. But yeah, you just feel very small. But I thought, well, they'll be back in a few hours probably. ultimately, I guess they helped those guys get to the shelter cabin, and then they continued on to no. So they didn't actually come back. Anyway, so I hunkered down more, and at some point I decided we need to be on the trail. So like I inched the sled up little by little, a couple feet at a time, and reset the hooks and dragged from the front, even though the team was almost like a fan hitch at this point. And we got on the trail, which took probably an hour or two to do. I got that sled on the trail, just in case it got worse. And I had also got word that forecast was not expected to change at any time. But this is bad. It could be like this for days. And then so I kind of sat down like in the storm. It was like all white and powdery, and it was like this cloud you're in. You feel like you're in a cloud. There was like a little bit of an orange glow of the sun, and so it was probably like, I don't know how high it was, but I'm sure it was a ground storm. When you're in it, it feels like it's everywhere. Just kind of sat there and thought about a lot of things, basically. Yeah. And I just knew that, it was my mom's birthday. I tried to talk to her out there. I was like, I need to go be with my family, ultimately. But then I still curled up a little bit longer in the sled, and then not long after that, somebody showed up hitting on the sled. And it was like you mentioned, it was the guy in the mini truck on snow tracks. And do you want to come? Do you want to get out of here? And he said, "Well, I almost left you," because I guess he was hitting on the sled and I didn't hear it. He was hitting on a sled that was curled up in, and I didn't hear it. That's how loud it was from the wind.
Oh my God.
But basically, I had sat down, asked my mom what I should do. Felt like she told me I should leave and be with my family. This guy shows up right after that. And I asked him, well, who else is coming, because I have 11 dogs here. And he's like, tells me if there's a lot of people out there now, basically describes that everybody had all of search and rescue from White Mountain was out there. And there's like several snow machines a mile or two back on the way. So I decided to go with him. And I got in the mini truck. And this is like the worst thing. Something you don't ever want to do is decide to leave your dog team there, which I still feel bad about. But I would not have gone with him. And he didn't tell me there were other people coming right there. But yeah, I do think about that pretty regularly. Should I have left knowing there was people coming, or should I have waited, 10 or 20 minutes till they got there? But either way, I decided to go with him. We went like a half a mile, and that thing got stuck in the snow. And I didn't have any of the gear or food or anything. I had my parka. And so we were actually worse off there for 5 or 10 minutes. And he was like, he didn't even have the proper gear on. He was from the area. He could handle it better, I guess. But he hadn't made it out there. So we were stuck in the snow, and then at some point a snow machine comes up, and we have to leave that truck there and then go with the guy in the snow machine. We go a mile or two back to this little spot that's just like a little bit less windy. And I had actually stopped in before all that and waited for like 3 or 4 minutes looking for Bridget and Gerhard to check to catch up. I had thought that maybe they'd catch up and we just caravan the rest of the way because it had been getting so crazy. And I never saw the headlights. And I told myself, well, these other teams made it, so maybe I should just keep going. And plus, you're so forward oriented at that point, you're just thinking about finishing. But we got there, and that's where they had brought those other 2 dog teams to. And there was probably 6 or 8 people there, multiple snow machines. And then there was teams like going almost immediately. My team, the Bridget and Gerhardt's team, uh, were both there, and there's like a vet, a bunch of search and rescue people, and it was like 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And so we were sitting there, and everybody's got a story. I was like, we need to get out of here now because the sun's going to go down. It takes so much time to get back. So basically, I was thinking, I just started helping getting the dogs out. Ended up driving Gerhardt's sled, and his team was from Mississippi. And we put 4 dogs in the sled, and then everybody there was helping to get the dogs out, essentially, like as fast as possible before sun went down. It's still windy, but it's probably going to get worse. It was definitely harder to see anyway. Then they pulled me on the snow machine, and we started going like 15 or 20 miles an hour. And I started screaming at the guy, and he stops. And we got to slow down. And 4 dogs in the bag, and I'm basically at this point I realized how cold and tired I actually was, and that the wind was like sucking all this energy out of me that whole time, which you don't think about. Well, I didn't think about it anyway. If you've never been in it, and so everybody starts shuttling the dogs back to White Mountain. That ends up being the end of the race. The next year, I take off. Man, I'm not doing this ever again. Myself out run dogs. I did it right, good enough. I had even promised my older son that I was not going to do it. Things develop and your mindset changes. And I thought, well, am I going to let this situation define me forever? Or am I just going to pick myself up back again and do it again? Yeah, you can't let that hold you down forever. And I felt like it was the right thing to do. I had not considered that I should have continued or anything. Second guess any of those things at all. Even now, that still was the right thing to do. It was just too much. It was just too much. So I'm content with the 2022 I did it on, for getting out of there safely. But then, ultimately I just decided, well, might as well try again. Love running dogs, and it was a beautiful experience otherwise. Just keep on doing, just keep on going, basically. It's a different point in your life. Just keep on going. Try it again, have a better time, all that kind of thing. And put everything from the past kind of where it should stay and not be the only time that you're ever on the Iditarod, where it was this huge dramatic emotional deal for my life personally. And so that was kind of the reason I came back again. It kind of ended up becoming, at the very end, a different situation. But all of that put together is why it bothered me so much that it might end negatively, and I decided that I wasn't going to let that happen. So that's when all that ended up happening. Anyway, that's the whole story. So I knew that anybody that's going to watch to this end is probably a real Mushing fan.
Yeah.
And then they know about that situation. So that's the story, the way that it happened for me.
Right. Yeah. We got, it's good to complete the whole thing, because it's not just this year's Iditarod for you. There's the whole background to it. So now that's a little bit more of a complete of a picture.
And then, I don't want to be somebody that like tries to like feed off or get notoriety off the situation. It just happens to be very personally dramatic. And I've deliberately not told the story because of that reason. But now it's probably time that I told the story to somebody that doesn't already know it. So, in my doppelganger, I was sharing.
Thank you, man.
On the podcast.
Yeah, well, I think listeners will be excited to hear this story, and is a very authentic telling of the story from you. And, and if you, we do hope to see you, get into that Burled Arch someday. But if you decide not to go back out and run the race, we wouldn't hold it against you either, and I don't think anyone would. And, but, yeah, we really appreciate you sharing, which is it's tough. That's a tough thing to share with anybody, let alone, with me and Brendan. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
But there's a little bit of time separation there, so I can more comfortably tell it now than then.
Right. Yeah. Time heals some of the wounds. And yeah, man, I think, it's probably good to wrap things up, but, sleddogtalk.com, and, we go check out the website. Brendan, do you have, some closing remarks?
I was just going to offer Sean an opportunity you said that you own your own kennel. So if you want to like promote your kennel, or if there are listeners out there that want to support you or your cause, just anything that you'd like the fans to be aware of, use this platform to share that with them.
Yeah, well, like I said, I like offline mushing. So I think if you're trying to find out about me or my kennel, it's pretty difficult. Pretty difficult to do because I don't have a kennel page or a website or anything. I'm not saying I won't do it, but
sleddogtalk.com.
Yeah. I mean, unofficially, I named the kennel Werewolf Mushing, but mostly that's because I like the movie Teen Wolf. And the song there's like a montage when he's playing basketball called Win in the End. Yeah, I really love that song. I listened to that a lot.
I think that was on your playlist for Copper Basin.
I might have played it for you.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
But no, it's not really a lot of information. And no, I'm not going to promote anything, personally. I just like to run the dogs. And as far as Iditarod goes, I love being out there. If you want to, maybe I'll offer some t-shirts at some point, but it's not a big deal. But as far as promoting anything, the only thing would be the new website, sleddogtalk.com. Really being built, hopefully, as what can become a resource that people want to use for mushing. That would be it. Just check it out, and if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, it's your world.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're gonna click to stop recording, but if you wouldn't mind sticking around just for a couple seconds for a quick debrief. But yeah, thank you for sharing those amazing stories, and for putting together this website that's going to benefit mushing, benefit the sled dog community, hopefully in a big way. And I'm going to be checking out the website, and I encourage anyone listening to do the same thing.